It's the next trip to the United States for the Winter Olympics in February, which could determine how successful this year will be. James Monroe, Sky News.
That's it from me. More sport at 20 past.
Well, look at the newspapers now, and The Guardian reports claims from Taliban troops that they're closing in on another key opposition leader. The Times says Osama bin Laden wants Muslims in Pakistan to overthrow their leaders. It accuses the Al-Qaeda leader of trying to turn the war on terror into a religious war. The Telegraph front page is dominated by a picture of carpet bombing and ordinary life going on regardless. Terrifying, says the Mirror, as a reporter apparently walks unchecked into an airliner cockpit at London Stansted. The Daily Mail puts the war on the inside pages. Page 1 is devoted to a surgeon found guilty of a catalogue of errors that went unchecked for years. You're watching Sky News. These are the top stories this hour. America and Europe have been told to prepare for a possible terrorist strike on a nuclear power station. RAF jets were even scrambled over Sellafield last weekend, but the terrorist threats turned out to be a hoax. Extra security is in force at the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. The state governor, Gray Davis, said they'd had intelligence reports that the famous landmark would be a terrorist target in the next week. Tony Blair has made a direct appeal to Israel and the Palestinians to end the cycle of bloodshed. Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon said there could be no compromise on security. Let's have a look at the weather now. In England and Wales will be mostly fine and dry after a rather chilly start in many places. South East Ireland will be dry too, although it will be quite cloudy there. Scotland, Northern Ireland and northwestern counties of the Republic will see outbreaks of rain edging down from the northwest. The rain may be heavy at times over western hills, but it won't amount to much over the eastern half of Scotland. It will be cool and windy in the northwest, pleasantly mild in the sunshine, though, in the south. Stay with us here on Sky News for all the very latest, live in half an hour. See you then.
Beefing up for ground combat. As U.S. forces press the air attack in Afghanistan, plans to use more Special Forces ground units run into trouble. The California governor reveals what he says is a possible terror threat against California's bridges. The battle over how to strengthen airline security comes to a head tonight on Capitol Hill. And Eye on America. He survived September 11th, and because of his bravery, others did too.
This is the CBS Evening News, with Dan Rather reporting from CBS News headquarters in New York.
Good evening. More bombs thundered down on Taliban troops in Afghanistan today, and U.S. officials emphasized again that this war against terrorism is only in its beginning stages. There's been a shifting in the military gears, with Taliban communications and infrastructure said to be in ruins. U.S. air power is now trying to clear the way for more action by ground forces. But as CBS News national security correspondent David Martin reports tonight, this is no easy task.
As American jets continue to bomb the Taliban front lines, the U.S. is stepping up its preparations for a ground campaign by the Northern Alliance by trying to infiltrate more special forces into Afghanistan. But they are running into bad weather and, in one case, hostile fire.
The ground fire was simply too heavy to unload the folks, and so they went back, and they'll try it again in a different landing area.
The special forces go in by helicopter low and at night to work with Northern Alliance soldiers, doing everything from calling in airstrikes on Taliban targets to arranging airdrops of food and ammunition. Rumsfeld wants to triple or quadruple the small number already on the ground.
We have a number of teams cocked and ready to go. It's just a matter of having the right kind of equipment to get them there, and the landing zones in places where it's possible to get in and get out.
The U.S. is also airdropping food and ammunition to the anti-Taliban forces in other parts of Afghanistan as the war moves closer to the start of a ground campaign in which the foot soldiers will be Northern Alliance troops. The Taliban may get more foot soldiers of its own as Pakistani tribesmen cross into Afghanistan, vowing to crush America. The Northern Alliance is outnumbered and outgunned, but American air power, which is attacking everything from tanks to caves, is the great equalizer. Some of the strikes have used cluster bombs, which break up into smaller bomblets to cover as wide an area as possible.
They're being used on frontline Al-Qaeda and Taliban troops to try to kill them, is why we're using them, to be perfectly blunt.
A ground campaign would almost certainly mean more casualties, perhaps to Americans. So the U.S. has begun moving medical hospitals and other medical units into the region. Dan?
David Martin at the Pentagon. Afghan forces opposing the Taliban made no secret of their delight today as they watched U.S. aircraft batter their old enemies. Still, as CBS's Maureen Maher reports from near the front in northern Afghanistan, the loose, very loose alliance called the United Front is not yet ready to mount any major offensive.
Targeting a deeply entrenched Taliban, American bombing intensified over northeast Afghanistan today. The raids began before dawn and ended only after bad weather obscured the front lines. Taliban forces have kept the United Front penned up in this corner of Afghanistan for years. Even if U.S. airstrikes can break this line, United Front commanders estimate as many as 20,000 Taliban troops are massed behind it. Still, if the Taliban is removed from here, it would open a key path to northern cities. Today's bombing, which could be heard and felt as far as 12 miles away, held a captive audience, from Russian guards on the neighboring Tajikistan border, probably glad to see someone else fighting in Afghanistan, to school children who cheered on the American effort.
Thank you.
Despite this week's pounding, United Front General Barry Olai claims Taliban forces have not yet moved. Reinforcements, tanks, and artillery are still needed, and the general says his men will move when conditions are better.
United Front commanders say they may be within a week of advancing on Taliban territory. Any more American assaults like today's, and it may soon be seen if this time they can keep their promise. Maureen Maher, CBS News, Hoja Bahauddin, northern Afghanistan.
Turkey, a member of the NATO alliance, today became the first Muslim country to commit troops to the war in Afghanistan. 90 Turkish commandos experienced in mountain warfare will join U.S. Special Forces training and advising anti-Taliban fighters. The government of Pakistan insisted again today its arsenal of nuclear weapons is well protected. But there is concern about certain Pakistani nuclear scientists, some of whom are sympathetic to Osama bin Laden and the Taliban. And bin Laden is doing his best to stir up such fundamentalist, radical, anti-Western passions, as CBS's Tom Fenton reports tonight.
In a letter broadcast on an Arab network, Osama bin Laden urged Pakistani Muslims to rise up against the Christian crusade against Islam. The letter, signed and handwritten in Arabic, said Muslims in Afghanistan are being killed while the Pakistani government is standing beneath the Christian banner. It was an inflammatory appeal to a Pakistani public which could further destabilize a country that became the world's latest nuclear power in 1998 and suffered a coup a year later when General Musharraf seized power. Pakistan is believed to have as many as 24 nuclear warheads that can be delivered by intermediate-range missiles. President Musharraf insists they are totally secure. But tensions in this country and inside the armed forces raise questions about whether they could fall into the wrong hands. Questions that are raised by one of Pakistan's leading nuclear physicists.
One will have great cause for concern if the government should fall, if for some reason something should happen to the head of state. And since there are strong sentiments in people who work in the nuclear establishment, I think that there is strong reason for worry.
Including the fact that a retired scientist who helped develop Pakistan's bomb was recently arrested and questioned about his fundamentalist religious views and ties to the Taliban. And intelligence reports that the Al-Qaeda terrorists have been trying to obtain weapons-grade nuclear material.
We know of certain knowledge that Al-Qaeda has, over the years, had an appetite for acquiring weapons of mass destruction of various types, including nuclear materials.
The Taliban ambassador dismissed reports that they already possess small nuclear weapons. He told CBS News, "We don't have the talent to make a nuclear bomb." But the Taliban regime does have militant friends in Pakistan, a country where volunteers are already massing on the border to join the battle in Afghanistan. Tom Fenton, CBS News, Islamabad, Pakistan.
In this country, the governor of California made a surprising announcement late today, one that took federal officials certainly by surprise. It was about possible terror attacks the governor says could come as soon as tomorrow. CBS News' Jerry Bowen is in our CBS News Los Angeles bureau. Jerry, what's all this about?
Dan, the alleged targets this time are not buildings, but bridges, perhaps 6 bridges along the West Coast, landmark bridges here in California. The Golden Gate and Bay Bridges in San Francisco, the Vincent Thomas Bridge at Los Angeles Harbor, and the picturesque Coronado Bridge in San Diego, named as potential targets by a number of sources, according to California Governor Gray Davis.
We've received from several different sources threats that the law enforcement community in general believes are credible, that between November 2nd and November 7th at rush hour, there will be an effort to blow up one of those bridges.
The California Highway Patrol said extra security will be put on each of the bridges, including National Guard troops. But a spokesman emphasized the bridges are safe and traffic will not be stopped. Security experts say it's not surprising that the bridges might be targeted by terrorists, not only because of the heavy commuter traffic that uses each of them, but because of the symbolism of a structure like the Golden Gate.
It symbolizes America. I mean, the Golden Gate Bridge symbolizes engineering feat, symbolizes what Americans can accomplish, and it's a beautiful bridge. And that beauty, if it was destroyed, would affect America.
For its part, the FBI tells CBS News it is still trying to substantiate the threats which did not specify which bridges might be involved. Dan?
Jerry Bowen in our Los Angeles bureau. After weeks of debate and delay, there's a showdown in Congress tonight on legislation to improve aviation system safety against terrorists. CBS's Bob Schieffer has late details. Bob?
Well, Dan, the House is headed toward a final vote tonight on several measures to strengthen airport security, including one that would turn over baggage screening at airports to federal law enforcement agents. It's turned into a bitter partisan fight, and with a vote perhaps less than an hour away, still too close to call.
Airline crews who wanted to federalize the screeners and the top White House lobbyist Nick Callio, who's against it, came to the Capitol looking for votes. House Republicans said their opposition was grounded in a reluctance to enlarge the federal government. Democrats saw another reason.
It's because Tom DeLay and Dick Armey were trying to please, I guess, the special interests who did not want to lose these contracts.
He meant the mostly foreign-owned companies that currently hold the multi-million-dollar contracts to screen airport baggage. They mounted a bare-knuckle lobbying campaign to keep law enforcement agents from doing the job. Before the vote, their head lobbyist said they might sue the government if they lost.
If the federal government was going to nationalize their workforce, in essence, take away that business, that industry, there's certainly a lot of case support for them to receive compensation under our Constitution.
Final debate was fiercely partisan, ironic because there'd been strong bipartisan support for numerous airport security measures until Republican leaders Armey and DeLay convinced the White House to oppose federalizing the screen.
Since then, it's been an all-out partisan mud fight. Still no prediction on a winner. Dan?
Bob Schieffer reporting live from Capitol Hill. Next year on the CBS Evening News. She died of inhalation anthrax, but how did she become infected? The latest in the hunt for clues. On the war front at home tonight, there are more sites of suspected anthrax contamination. In the Midwest, a postal facility in Kansas City, Missouri. 200 workers there were urged to take antibiotics as a precaution. Some anthrax was detected at a postal maintenance center in Indianapolis. The FDA says 4 of its mailrooms near Washington, D.C. may be contaminated. And here in New York, CBS News medical correspondent Elizabeth Caledon has the latest on the still baffling case of a hospital worker who died yesterday of inhalation anthrax.
Just like this blurry old photograph of Kathy Nguyen, the picture of how she was exposed to enough anthrax to kill her is not coming into focus. She was a person of unwavering routines, neighbors say, kept an immaculate apartment, took the number 6 subway line every day, lived alone after a divorce, and worked hard.
No, it's not like Kathy was a person that visited a lot of people, that traveled a lot. She was a person that concentrated on work and home.
Though tests of her home and the hospital have come up negative, they continue to be scoured for clues. Anyone she was friends with or even spoke to is fair game.
What about her personal life? Where does she go? Who does she interact with?
But so far, the lines of inquiry are leading nowhere, and health officials are stymied.
And this, for the first time, is an individual who doesn't have direct male responsibility, where we don't have any knowledge of any evidence of anthrax in the facility as of this moment. So we're very puzzled.
Compounding the mystery, 2 potential leads have dried up. Preliminary tests for anthrax on a hospital co-worker with skin lesions came back negative, as did tests suggesting there might have been anthrax spores on Kathy Nguyen's clothing.
The only thing tests have revealed for certain is that the anthrax found in Kathy Nguyen's body is the same strain found in the letters sent to the media and Senate Majority Leader Tom Daschle.
All of them have been basically indistinguishable from each other.
The difference this time is critical. There's no postmarked source, and the anthrax could basically have come from anywhere in this quiet woman's world. Elizabeth Caledon, CBS News, New York.
U.S. health agencies acted today on 2 different anthrax drug treatment matters. The FDA cracked down on foreign internet companies selling unauthorized Cipro to Americans. It said the drugs would be seized at the border. Also today, a warning to doctors: do not prescribe the antibiotic doxycycline to pregnant women for possible anthrax exposure. Doxycycline may harm the fetus. Next here on CBS, below the fuming pile in lower Manhattan, we take you to the crushed and crumbling world of smoke and rubble and death beneath Ground Zero.
The areas. The top stories are...
To deal with some of these underlying issues, these issues that create the conditions in which the terrorists or the extremists can use causes in order to further extreme political ends. And it really is worth, however difficult, however uncomfortable it may be from time to time, it is worth doing, in my view.
Well, you're watching Sky News. These are our top stories. America and Europe have been told to prepare for a possible terrorist strike on a nuclear power station. RAF jets were even scrambled over Sellafield last weekend, but the threats turned out to be a hoax. There's extra security at the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco after a warning from the state governor that it was amongst several bridges being targeted by terrorists. He said there was intelligence suggesting an attack within the next week. More US troops are to be sent into Afghanistan, and there'll be no bombing calls for the Muslim holy month of Ramadan. The Pentagon announcement came as the fugitive Osama bin Laden sent another defiant fact to the Gulf TV station Al Jazeera. Remember that for an instant update on the latest news and pictures, satellite viewers in the UK and Ireland can press the red button on their digital remote to select Sky News Active. One of the 11 Afghans accused of the Stansted hijacking has claimed he would have been killed if he hadn't fled from the Taliban. Ali Safiri told the Old Bailey he accepted responsibility for the 3-day siege but had been left with no choice.
The standoff at Stansted lasted 3 days and 3 nights. Today, the alleged leader of the hijackers told the court why they hadn't given themselves up sooner. "We were frightened," Mr. Safi said, "of the armed men creeping towards us on their elbows, believing the police intended to storm the plane or kill us, or send us back to the hands of the Taliban." Those on board, he told the court, knew a representative of the Taliban was present at Stansted. Even a 2-year-old boy was looking out of the window crying, he said, and saying the Taliban are coming forward. Mr. Safi had already told the jury that he'd led an underground movement within Afghanistan opposing the Taliban. He said one of its members had been captured and tortured, giving up others' names before he was killed. Then, Mr. Safi said, 17 members of the group disappeared. This, he said, was when they knew the noose around them was tightening. This was the result. All 10 defendants, some seen here surrendering, deny charges of hijack and forced imprisonment. although Mr. Safi told the jury he took responsibility for it. "I'm not proud of that," he said, "but we only did it because he had to." The case continues. Rachel Ammett, Sky News at the Old Bailey.
This is Sky News, all the sports coming up. Rob Watton has news of the latest UEFA Cup matches, including how Chelsea were knocked out.
Nobody could have ever guessed something like this was going to happen. We were in Pakistan in the early hours of the next day. A story this size, this magnitude, is